So it's time for Nick Foles to take over at quarterback again for the Philadelphia Eagles for the first time since week 2 of this season. Carson Wentz has gone down yet again with an injury in week 14, this time with a back injury. Last year, Nick Foles didn't really have to do much up until the playoffs. But this time, the weight is on his shoulders to carry them to the playoffs. We've seen Foles pull off heroics last year and all the way back in 2013, and there might just be some good reason to say he will pull off more here in the final 2 weeks of the disappointing 2018 season of the Philadelphia Eagles.
In Foles territory, yelling at those that live in Wentz territory, you got your head in the sand. You're not an Eagles fan, you're a Philadelphia Ostrich fan. This is beginning. All it takes is a little 3-game run. All it takes is this 29% playoff odds. That's where the Eagles stand today. 29% chance to make the playoffs. All it takes is for that to become 100% fruition, for you to be divided 50-50 in Philadelphia.
It's probably hard to imagine that the Eagles will win their final 2 games with Nick Foles. But hear me out. The Eagles play in a surprisingly weak NFC this year, apart from good teams like the Saints, Rams, and Bears. Winning the NFC East is pretty much out of reach, as Dallas has to play Tampa Bay at home and the Giants in New York, which to me doesn't sound very frightening to the Cowboys. So now, if there is a slim chance at winning the NFC East and getting the number 4 seed, they have to go for the number 6 seed, which would mean they are in competition with the Minnesota Vikings. Now the Vikings beat the Eagles in week 5. That means if they had the same record after week 17, the Vikings would get in. But since the Vikings tied with the Packers in week 2, they can't tie records after week 17 with the Eagles. If the Eagles lose in week 16, that would mean the Vikings have to lose out from here on to the Lions and Bears, which is unlikely considering the fact that they play the Lions next week. There is probably a less than 10% chance of that happening. So the Eagles have to win against the Texans at home in week 16, then travel to Washington in week 17. The Eagles' playoff chances stand at just 37%, with the Vikings at 65%. But if the Eagles win out, they still need help from the Bears in week 17, which will probably happen. Now don't get me wrong, the Vikings are good at home. It's just they have to play the Bears' defense. Last time, they scored just 20 points in a loss. Kirk Cousins had a mediocre performance with 262 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. And their running game was non-existent, with their feature back, Dalvin Cook, carrying it 9 times for just 12 yards. And the whole team combined got just 14 carries for 22 yards. When they play the Bears, since it is week 17, and a win will probably get them into the playoffs, there will be a lot of pressure. Problem is, Kirk Cousins crumbles under pressure. In week 16, they play the Lions. And without thinking, you'd say, easy win, right? Well, they play on the road, and they suck on the road. They've won just 2 of their 7 road matchups. The chance of them winning that game are high, but there is still a big chance they lose. For the Eagles, they play the Texans and the Redskins. Fortunately for them, they play an injured Texans team at home. Last week, the Texans pulled off a win by 1 score to the Jets. Their defense gave up 22 points. Sam Darnold had 253 yards and 2 touchdowns with a 100 rating. Clearly, their defense is not at its fullest strength. I see them winning 24-20 at home. Now with momentum and hope on their side, 8-7, the Eagles head into Washington. The Bears beating the Vikings might actually be a long shot since they have nothing to play for, but they still will have a good chance at winning. At this point, the Eagles will most likely be playing Josh Johnson for the Redskins. Let's be real here. They will crush the Redskins. Nick Foles will play great under pressure, replicating his NFC Championship and Super Bowl performances in those 2 games. All in all, the Eagles have to get some help from the Lions and Bears and hopefully win against the Texans. This theory is definitely far-fetched, but we've seen Nick Foles thrive under pressure, and I think we will see it again.